Hi everyone, my name is Derek Johnson with Tatango.com. I'm here with Joe Bowser from Innovista Law, and he's part of the TCPA Defense Force, essentially a component of the law firm that focuses on TCPA compliance for things like text message marketing. You do phone calls as well, right? Mm-hmm. Anything TCPA.
Faxes.
Perfect. I don't know if
they still exist.
Okay, I was wondering if anybody uses faxes still.
Shocking.
Okay, so one question we get asked a lot is, number one, how do you select a good TCPA attorney? And then why and when would you actually employ a TCPA attorney? Because at least from kind of the conversations I have, the first time a brand talks to a TCPA attorney is when they receive a lawsuit or a threat of a lawsuit. I'm guessing that's not the best time to employ or engage a TCPA attorney.
I think that's a good sign that it's too late.
Okay.
No, this is absolutely an ounce of prevention kind of area of the law. The TCPA has statutory damages of $500 to $1,500 per call or text.
Okay.
So the exposure in these lawsuits is significant. It's the second most common kind of litigation in federal courts. The plaintiff's attorneys are all over this because of the statutory damages. So this is definitely an area where you want your marketing team and your legal team to be working together to make sure that the marketing campaign is compliant with the TCPA.
From like day one?
From the development stage.
Okay, so even before you actually launch, like the process and building it, you want the TCPA attorneys involved.
The creative people can work in tandem with
Yeah.
the people that are developing the technical, the rollout of it. But you definitely want to make sure that issues like consent, who are we calling, what kind of phone numbers are we calling, because the rules vary based on all of those factors.
Okay.
Right. So it matters what you're calling about. It matters what you're who you're texting.
Yeah.
What's your relationship with them? What's the level of consent that you have? What do those disclosures look like? So legal needs to be involved in making sure that all of those things are buttoned up before you start the campaign.
That makes
because
sense.
you can very quickly, if you have a big list, you could start on day one and expose yourself to an enormous TCPA case.
Okay. And this is not something you would advise where a marketer, digital strategist can figure it out themselves?
Well, the problem with the TCPA is that you can read the law, and then you can read the TCPA regulations from the FCC.
Okay.
And that's about a third of the story.
Okay.
The rest of it is supplied by the courts in trying to give meaning to some very nebulous phrases that the FCC and Congress have used in the law. So an automatic telephone dialing system.
Yep.
I have never used that expression before in my life outside of work, right? So you have to know how the courts look at various forms of technology to figure out whether the technology you're going to use might be an auto dialer.
Okay.
And whether it's an auto dialer dictates the kind of consent you have and the nature of the campaign being informational or marketing related. So you need to be able to answer a series of questions to figure out what are the rules that apply and how do we navigate them.
So we have a lot of good content, I think, on the Tatango blog, but this is one of those things that, yes, you can be educated on the topic, but let a professional actually deal with the topic.
Well, complicating it further, courts can disagree, of course, right?
Okay.
Because they don't have very good guidance from Congress or the FCC, so they're left to put some real meat on these bones, and they might not necessarily agree. So you might have a loose standard in one area of the country, a strict standard in another area. So if you're going to have a national campaign, you want to make sure that you're meeting that strict standard.
Okay.
So just because a practitioner in Boston knows the rule in that area doesn't necessarily mean that that is the best course of action if you're going to have a national campaign where, say, the Ninth Circuit, which controls California,
Different
Oregon,
areas.
Washington, where those rules would apply.
Wow. Okay. So definitely employing an attorney is good and doing it right at the get-go.
Right.
Now, in terms of, I know a lot of brands have their own corporate counsel. Mm-hmm. They might have inside or outside counsel. Where do you recommend usually involving them, or do you recommend going to something like the TCPA Defense Force? How do all these people play together?
Well, a lot of times we find that the in-house counsel have just a tremendous range of responsibility.
Yep.
And getting in the weeds on the TCPA and reading the dozens of cases that come out every month probably isn't the best use of their time.
Okay.
right? And so we work with general counsel a lot and in-house counsel a lot to just make sure that we're working with the right people on the team so that everybody's involved and the folks in marketing, the folks in tech are all on the same sheet of music.
Okay, so usually it involves their corporate counsel, the brand, let's say, you helping their corporate counsel and providing assistance for the specific part of what is the TCPA, because it's very complex, and it seems like you just said that it's the second most filed case in federal court.
Type of case, right.
So it sounds like there's a lot of moving parts all the time that are being updated and changed, so you need to be aware of those. And it seems like most general counsel, that's not their top priority.
It may not be their top priority, or they may not just have the bandwidth to deal with every area of the law that they need to be responsible for in that level of depth.
And monitoring it for changes and things like that.
Right.
Okay, so I think we're all on the same page now. Definitely involved, kind of a TCPA expert, obviously an attorney. What would you recommend in terms of if somebody goes out at brand looking for an expert? Obviously you guys are experts here. What separates you guys from maybe other TCPA type attorneys? Or what would you say is kind of the defining factors to being a TCPA expert or attorney?
Well, it is something that you need to kind of obsess over, right?
Okay.
If you're not obsessed over the TCPA case law, and it can be all-consuming, then it's hard to say that you're on top of that in the way that an expert is.
Okay.
So there are plenty of attorneys who say, I handle class action work, but it might be a toxic tort class action one day, and Fair Debt Collection Practice Act case another day, and a TCPA case on Friday.
Yeah.
When you divide yourself that thin, you may not have that level of expertise across each of those areas.
Because your day is focused on TCPA 100% of the day, right? Okay, so yeah,
Don't tell my kids.
If you're busy enough with TCPA, you don't have time for other things. So if you had time for other things, you'd be missing stuff in the TCPA.
In the same way that you do text
messaging only.
Marketing all day, every day.
Yeah, exactly. And if I did something else,
we can share recipes, but we're probably better at other things.
So focus, finding a TCPA attorney that is solely focused, not just says they do TCPA, not says they know the TCPA, that's their focus.
Right.
They live and breathe, at least during the workday, for TCPA compliance.
Right. Well, and you want to have someone who knows both the compliance side and the litigation side.
Okay.
It's great to know the rules, and that's obviously tremendously important, but you also want to be monitoring where the plaintiff's bar is going, right?
Okay.
So, because you might not, the folks who are just worried about compliance may not see the trends in the courts. So you can get ahead of things and adjust your campaigns to avoid being the next target.
Oh, interesting.
Right? So we see the cases that get filed, we see the opinions that come out from the judges, and we're on top of all of that, and sharing that intel at the TCPA Defense Force so that everybody's aware of what's going on, so that the litigation news gets with the compliance people, so that we get the benefit of both worlds.
Okay, so there are maybe some attorneys that focus on TCPA compliance and giving advice as to how to be compliant, but maybe they're not doing also the litigation work, so they're kind of missing one component of that.
Right, because the real exposure is on the litigation.
That's the end. At the end, that's what costs you the money, right?
Exactly.
Okay, interesting. Anything else people should know? Maybe what about the TCPA Defense Force? Anything specific? I know you guys are focused solely on TCPA. Anything you want to tell the viewers?
Well, obviously you want to manage your costs appropriately, right?
Okay.
So we have a boutique model here. We believe in it. We focus on the TCPA. We have very excellent attorneys. We all came from very large firms. We have big law training, so we can litigate with the best of them and do every day. But you don't necessarily need to spend the big law department store model prices to be able to get that level of expertise.
Okay.
And we see the law going in that boutique model where folks really do need to specialize in an area of the law to that degree.
Okay. So lower cost than maybe the big law firm, but more specialization.
More specialization and the same quality and bench.
Sounds like a win-win almost. So I'm not trying to promote you here, but it sounds like a good deal.
That's our view.
Awesome. My name is Derek Johnson with Tatango.com, and I'm here with Joe Bowser from Innovista Law, and he is part of the TCPA Defense Force, and we are talking about TCPA compliance. Thanks for watching our video today. If you like this video, be sure to give us a thumbs up on YouTube. If you want to see more of these types of videos, be sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have comments or questions, please leave a comment or question in the comment section below.